It'd be great if you can kind of give like a brief intro of yourself and kind of just optimism in general for those who aren't that familiar.
Yeah, for sure. So I am Kevin. I am part of the founding team of Optimism PBC. Um, we work on scaling Ethereum. So we make it cheaper to do transactions. We also make transactions instant while still inheriting the security properties of Ethereum. And we're also really interested in like scaling not just Ethereum's technology, but also scaling Ethereum's values and what Ethereum means as a community, and trying to maintain that as we scale the technology. Cool. Actually, I'd love to do a quick, I don't know, like, is there some way to interact? Is there like a show of hands or something? I'd love to know, like, like maybe how many people here are, like developers, like interested in that part? How many people are more on, is there a good way to do that, Alex?
Yeah, you could just ask a question. People can do the like raise hand thing on Zoom.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do that. So maybe like, could you raise your hand if you are a developer? Cool. Maybe should we try the other? Do you want to raise your hand if you are not a developer? See who's participating? Okay. Got it. Cool. And maybe could we do a quick, could you raise your hand if you have heard about rollups? Cool. Oh, wow. A lot. Okay. Awesome. That is great context. Cool. All right. I'm going to jump right in. So, cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So, cool. I'm just going to hop right in then.
Just present. Yeah.
Yeah, present. Cool. So the title of this presentation is Ethereum is Sick. I work for Optimism PBC. Like I mentioned, we're building a protocol called Optimistic Ethereum. And to give you an overview of, what this talk will, the format of this talk, I'm going to spend the first like third just geeking out about Ethereum. Like I love Ethereum. I've spent the past 3 years of my life devoting like almost all of my waking hours to like being a part of the Ethereum community, like building things. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the scalability problem, how like the different ways that we can scale blockchains. And then I'm going to talk about optimistic rollup, which is our approach to scaling Ethereum. So yeah, so Optimism PBC is a public benefit corporation, and our focus is to enshrine fair access to public goods on the internet using open source software. And we are focused on scaling both Ethereum's tech and values. So we want Ethereum to be able to support much more people than it can support right now. And we also want Ethereum to maintain what it is as a community and what it stands for. Like we want Ethereum to maintain the values that we got, that we fell in love with Ethereum for. So we're going to start off with, Ethereum. Why is Ethereum so sick? And I'm just going to talk about, lots of people are interested in Ethereum for different reasons, but this is sort of my perspective and, why I've been so in love with Ethereum for the past 4 years and why, why it means so much to me. So this photo on the left is a photo from me at ETH Waterloo in 2017, which was one of the first big Ethereum hackathons. And I didn't know a whole lot about Ethereum at the time, but I knew, you could build stuff on it, and I wanted to try it out and learn how to use it. So I found this awesome team. They really like brought me up to speed with how to, develop smart contracts and how to, build a dApp. And in a weekend, we built this exchange called Zero Exchange, which, built on top of the 0x protocol for, decentralized exchange of tokens. And, it was a 3-day long process. And I remember on the last day, we were having these issues with testnet, and we were like, okay, you know what, let's just deploy this exchange on mainnet. And so we deployed the exchange on mainnet. Like we spent real money to deploy the contracts. And then we, when we were presenting it on demo day, we were actually exchanging like real tokens, like with real value. And there was like, thousands of dollars of value of these tokens of this that we're like trading between on this exchange that we built in like 2 days. So something incredibly empowering about being able to build something in such a short period of time that like does something so interesting. Like you're actually able to exchange real value and like deploy a project that exchanges real money around in 2 days. And I also remember just like the vibes at this hackathon were amazing. Like the Ethereum community and what it stands for is just like the sort of like electric energy in the air of like everyone at this hackathon feels like, you know, I can build anything on Ethereum and like no one can prevent me, and like I'm gonna dream big, and you know, I can create something that actually changes the world. I know that sounds idealistic and, you know, maybe you know, pie in the sky, but like it really, like I think we all generally believe that yeah, we can change the world with this. And so part of being able to like deploy on mainnet in a couple of days and, you know, write these programs that actually exchange real value, like Ethereum allows us to program value, right? You can write these smart contracts, you can write these programs that trade tokens, trade NFTs that interact with real value. And being able to program value allows us to program incentives, right? If you're able to make a contract that, you know, has different conditions for, you know, moving value to one person or another, or one, you know, party or another, it allows us to incentivize different behavior. And so being able to program incentives allows us to program human behavior. There's this like great quote by Charlie Munger, which is, you know, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And so being able to program human behavior is like an incredible power and an incredible responsibility that we have, to program that human behavior to drive collaboration and to drive, you know, positive sum interactions, and to incentivize behavior that brings us to a better, more equitable society. And that's incredibly empowering. I think like, at least when I was in college, I remember like seeing a bunch of things that were wrong in the world and just feeling like, well, like I'm not gonna be able to actually solve this by like writing code. So like, I can't actually, you know, change these things. But after working on Ethereum for the past couple of years, I've really started to feel like, wow, we can just change the incentives of these things. Like we can actually change the way that society functions by changing the incentives. Sorry, I see there's a message in the chat. It is the same Munger who called Bitcoin rat poison, yes. But it is a good quote, yes. Another reason why Ethereum is so cool to me and is so empowering, this is a snippet from the Ethereum 2 design goals. And one of these lines is, you know, ETH 2 should be able to survive World War III. I feel pretty confident that Ethereum will outlive me and probably all of us in this, you know, in this Zoom meeting, and probably all of our kids. Like the design goals behind Ethereum is to make this system incredibly resilient and persistent. And like this protocol is, you know, fundamental infrastructure that will be there forever, or for at least a very, very long time. And you can really think of Ethereum as, you know, like the internet in this way, where we sort of just take it for granted that it's going to be there and it's going to be sustainable, and it's not going to break, right? Or it's not going to change from underneath us. And something that's so cool about this is it means if you develop some infrastructure for Ethereum or some protocol on Ethereum that gets used and is like also becomes part of this foundational infrastructure, it will also survive World War III, right? It'll also potentially outlive you and outlive your kids. And I think there's not a lot of places in tech where you could build a project or, you know, work at a company where what you build or the product that you create will outlive you, right? Like companies have a life cycle, and like the idea that like, oh, I start a startup and then I create this thing, and then like eventually, right, like by the time you're old, your startup has maybe turned into this corporation that has stopped innovating and slowly dies and falls out of, falls apart, or, you know, gets taken over by other scrappy startups. But when you're building on Ethereum, these things could last forever. And that's super cool and very empowering. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm gonna grab my phone just to make sure I'm on time. Cool. So yes, Ethereum is so sick. The other thing that makes Ethereum so cool is just the people. There's this great quote by Vitalik that you can't fork a soul. So even though all of Ethereum's code is open source and anyone could create their own chain or copy of Ethereum, it's very hard to fork a community. It's very hard to fork a soul. And I think there's something that you can sense at Ethereum hackathons or Ethereum conferences, this vibe of, it's a very community-centric group of people that are looking out for one another, trying to help each other and trying to, they're playing positive sum games. Like they're trying to help one another and trying to build each other up and, mentor each other, educate people, get everyone up to speed. And I love it. This is a pretty ridiculous photo. This is a photo of ETH Denver. It's an amazing hackathon. I highly recommend people to go check it out. Once there's the next one. On the right, you have the Bufficorn, which is this mystical creature at ETH Denver. Someone dresses up as this buffalo unicorn hybrid and runs around and gives hugs to hackers, who are building on top of Ethereum. And here you have Vitalik, and I think that's actually the governor of Colorado, and they're, reading children books. I don't remember the context of this event, but I think it just sort of gives you an idea of like the vibes of Ethereum, right? It's this idea of like collaboration, being open to talking to different people, right? Like, it's not like, oh, we're just not going to talk to the government because like, they oppose us. It's like, no, we're going to build bridges and we're going to, have fun with it and give each other hugs along the way. Here's another hilarious screenshot of, I think this was 2018 at some Ethereum conference, and just all these Ethereum core contributors just went on stage and danced to this Badger song. And I don't exactly know why, but it's a lot of fun. And, the Ethereum community doesn't take itself too seriously. And here you have Vitalik in the back middle there doing the Badger dance, and our CTO Carl next to him doing the Badger dance with impeccable form. So yeah, the community also makes Ethereum so sick and is another core piece of why, why I love Ethereum. And beyond that, right, a lot of you guys are probably interested in building, maybe some of you guys are starting startups or looking for places to join. Ethereum is a vibrant ecosystem. Like, this picture is from a year ago, so it's probably super outdated. Like, the space moves so fast. But there's just so many interesting businesses and projects being built on top of Ethereum. It's the place to go if you're building something new, if you're trying to start a startup, if you are trying to, join a project. If you like get Ethereum skills, like there is no shortage of, projects trying to hire good talent. And then there's also this meme of, money Legos, or just like Legos in Ethereum. And like I mentioned, you can deploy a protocol on Ethereum, and if it becomes this sort of core primitive, it could be used by all sorts of other things and could be built on top of by all sorts of other projects. And it's not really a competitive game. Like, having more projects that get to interact with each other and are composable with one another makes the whole thing more valuable. Like, one classic hackathon project is take two, protocols and just like stack these two Lego pieces, and then you've created something new. And that new thing could actually be more valuable than either of these two little primitives. And so it's really, really cool how you have all these teams collaborating, all of these protocols fitting in together as different Lego pieces, and together they create this vibrant Ethereum ecosystem where there's all this stuff to do. Whereas alone, these individual protocols probably aren't that valuable. And here's a screenshot of Etherscan, like Etherscan's verified contracts. In the past day, a whole bunch of projects and contracts get deployed, and anyone in the world can deploy a contract to Ethereum. Some of these look pretty ridiculous. I just realized The first one is called Elon's Raptor engine. So I have no idea what that is. Maybe you should go check it out. But the cool thing is anyone in the world can deploy a contract. There's no credential that you need to, to go and build a contract and deploy it. To start playing with your own incentive games or try to incentivize the behavior that you want to see. And I know high school students who have deployed protocols on Ethereum that have like hundreds of millions of dollars locked up in them. So it's pretty crazy that like anyone in the world, it doesn't matter where you are, what your background is, how old you are, you can build something and you can deploy it and no one can stop you. And it wouldn't be, this conversation would not be complete without some charts with numbers going up. Ethereum is growing. The total value locked on Ethereum is one metric that a lot of people like to use. It's like 10x in the past year. There's just so much excitement. There's so many new developer tools, so many new developers, so many new projects, so much more, capital moving in. Like there's something happening here that's sort of this like Cambrian explosion on Ethereum. That's so invigorating. But Ethereum has been a bit of a victim of its own success, right? So Ethereum is growing, everyone wants to go use it. All this, there's more and more money moving in, but Ethereum is sick in, a bit of a negative way. Like Ethereum is struggling right now because Ethereum is congested, right? This chart is not going up and to the right. This chart is staying pretty stable. And this is the number of transactions per day. Ethereum is fully congested. People are doing as many transactions per day as Ethereum can handle right now. And, I'm sure you guys know about, Ethereum's fee market, but for those of you who don't, it's like Uber surge pricing, where the more people who are trying to transact at the same time, the more expensive it is. And so because Ethereum is congested and because things are exploding and because there's more innovation happening and more value moving in, it's getting more and more expensive to transact. So I took this screenshot yesterday and the chain was not that congested, but we're still talking like $50 to exchange 2 tokens on Uniswap. And to do things that are a little more complicated than that, it could be 5, 10x more expensive. So we're talking $250 or $500 for a transaction. Not to mention like when there's an NFT drop or something that's requiring a bunch of people to like come into Ethereum in a short period of time, these costs can 10x. And then we're talking like over $1,000 to like send a transaction on Ethereum, which is really ridiculous and doesn't fit with the values of like permissionlessness, openness, inclusivity. I think back to 2017 when I was able to deploy this contract to mainnet and actually demo it by, transacting on mainnet. If I were doing a hackathon today, I wouldn't be able to do that. It would be way too expensive. I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars to deploy a contract on mainnet. So it's incredibly important that like to maintain Ethereum's values of being inclusive and being permissionless and really being open to everyone, that we fix this problem, right? That we fix this sickness that Ethereum has right now of not being able to scale, of only being able to transact, only being able to process 1.25 million transactions per day. Cool. So that brings us to the next section of the talk, which is how do we scale this thing, right? If you're like me, like those values and that community seems super awesome, but right now, it's not super accessible to everyone. So this is a screenshot from a lecture that Vitalik gave in 2017. Like scalability has been a problem that the Ethereum community has been trying to figure out since 2014. It's been like 7 years in the making. In 2017, I remember watching this talk, and this is like the first slide where he says, okay, what's the most naive way that you could scale, right? Let's just have super big blocks. There is an Ethereum block that gets mined around every 13 seconds. And there's only so many transactions that can fit in that block and it fit in each block. And that's why we are constrained to 1.25 million transactions per day. But why don't we just make the blocks 1,000 times bigger, right? Then we can do 1,000 times as many transactions. Problem solved. And if you're familiar with like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, like Bitcoin Cash was a fork of Bitcoin that just increased the block size so you could do more Bitcoin transactions. And there's a direct trade-off here, right? If you process more transactions in a given block, it now everyone who runs a validator or a full node has to process 1,000 times as many transactions. And there's a lot of like deep technical reasons why like you literally wouldn't be able to do this on like Ethereum client software right now. But like, for example, why can't we just like 2x the block size or 5x the block size? The reason why is if we look at this chart on the left, this is statistics of all of the Ethereum full nodes that are being run right now. So people all around the world are downloading blocks, processing all transactions, and verifying that they're valid. And they have the state of the entire Ethereum chain, including everyone's balances and all the contracts and all the contract state on these machines, these full node machines, right? And there's like 3,700 of them right now. And like, here's a picture of, in the room over, in our living room, my roommate runs an Ethereum full node. This is like a particularly like beefy one because he had like, he wants it to be like super, super fast. And it's also an archive node. But yeah, like we run our own Ethereum full node. So we have the state of the entire Ethereum chain like in our living room, which is super cool. But if we just make our blocks bigger, it starts to get to a place where this hardware wouldn't be able to keep up, right? You just increase the hardware requirements as you increase the block size or the number of transactions that each node has to process. And what you would start to see is this graph on the left, you start to see this number going down, right? Like at a certain point, you're jacking up the block size, then like our full node will fall offline at some point, right? It won't be able to keep up. You'll have to host a full node in some data center in some server farm somewhere. And then like in order to run an Ethereum node, you'll have to like host it on AWS. And then all of Ethereum's full nodes will be in AWS and DigitalOcean, and it won't be all that decentralized anymore, right? Like the fact that we can run a full node in our living room and have access to this, like this is how we fulfill that design goal of, Ethereum will survive a World War III, right? You're directly compromising decentralization by increasing the block size. So this is not a good scaling solution. You can do it a little bit, like Ethereum has increased the block size a little bit in recent years, but it's not a good way to get, if you're looking at like an order of magnitude more scalability, it's not a good solution. And so this is slide 3 of Vitalik's talk where he says, okay, let's try another naive solution, right? Let's just have 1,000 chains. So if we have 1,000 different altcoins, 1,000 different Ethereum chains, then you could still make it so that, you could run a full node on consumer hardware. So each chain is doing 1 million transactions per day, right? But there's 1,000 of them. So now you can process 1,000 times as many total transactions. The downside here is that all of these chains now are not sharing in any security that they have, right? They all have their own unique security model, right? Ethereum might be one of the chains that has more security, but then, the Ethereum 2 or Ethereum, whatever we call it, like the other Ethereum chains, the other 999 of them would have different security guarantees. And each of those chains would have to have its own security budget, right? And so I don't think this is actually accurate that each chain has 1,000x lower security. It's not like there's a limited amount of, capital that can go to, a security budget for all chains. But it is the case that none of these chains are sharing their security. And this is where we're at right now. Like Ethereum scaling problem has led to the success of a bunch of different alternative layer ones. So you have like Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, Phantom, Avalanche, and these are all super smart teams, really talented teams working on really interesting stuff. But we do have this problem where all of these different layer ones have their own security models, right? So like Ethereum getting more secure does not make any of these other chains more secure. And any one of these given chains getting more secure does not benefit any of the other ones, right? So they have split security models. Which is not ideal. And so why isn't multi-L1 great, right? There are a lot of benefits to this world that we're in right now, in that if I want to go deploy a contract in a hackathon, I could go and do it on Polygon, and it's so cheap. It's so much cheaper. I can go transact on Polygon for like, a portion of a cent. So like, why isn't this good, right? Isn't this solving the problem? It's now accessible to everyone. But each of these L1s has its own security model, right? And there's a lot of reasons why this isn't great, like all the way to like users just not being educated about, like, as they're moving between like 10 different chains, like, do they really know all the different security models of all these different 10 chains? Like, I really doubt it. But sorry, one sec, let me turn off my notifications. But yeah, also, like, you want to be in a world in which all of these different chains can benefit from the security of one another, right? You don't want this zero-sum game where like you want one coin to be worth more than the other coin so it has more security. What you would like is, like, as one chain gets more secure, they all get more secure, right? And also, a lot of assets originate on Ethereum. So a lot of these assets on other L1s are bridged Ethereum assets. Your assets are only as safe as the bridge contract that lives on Ethereum. So here's a bridge contract on the left, which is the Avalanche bridge contract, which has $5 billion locked up in it. That's a lot of money. And so, like, if you deposit some coins into this bridge contract, now your coins on Avalanche are just like an IOU for those tokens, right? So if like this bridge contract ever got compromised, those tokens that you have on Avalanche aren't worth anything because they can no longer be redeemed for anything on layer 1 Ethereum. So the security of a lot of these assets that live on these different layer 1s is like the weakest link is the bridges, right? And a lot of these bridges, people are trying to make bridges more secure, but a lot of these bridges for layer 1s are sort of multi-sigs. Some of them are using sort of like trustless hardware. And it's very scary, right? Like, this is a lot of money. It's a huge honeypot. And so when you move between layer 1s, it's really important to think about, where are these assets being held? And like, what are the security assumptions around this bridge? Like, is this bridge safe? Because if you hold millions of dollars on another layer 1, and that those assets originated from a bridge, if that bridge ever gets compromised, you don't have that money anymore, which is really terrifying. And here's a couple of screenshots of, Poly Network had a $600 million bridge hack recently, and Polygon recently patched a critical bug in their bridge, luckily avoiding what could have been an $850 million bridge hack. So these bridges are pretty scary. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years we see more major bridge hacks with like really large amounts of money. So how do we solve this issue, right? Like, how do we not end up in this world with tons of layer 1s that don't share security and are only as secure as their bridges, right? And that brings us to layer 2s. So the idea of a layer 2 is you could have a chain that inherits the security of a layer 1. And the layer 1 being Ethereum here. And the most promising layer 2 solutions right now are optimistic rollups and ZK rollups. I'm realizing I'm a little bit low on time, so I'm just going to give you guys a really quick high-level intuition for how these work. The basic idea behind optimistic rollup is you don't go to court to cash a check, but you do go to court if a check bounces. So the idea here is, like, right now, when you send a transaction to Ethereum layer 1, all of these 3,000 nodes all have to process that transaction, and that's why it's so expensive. But instead, what you could do is just post a tiny little commitment that is, significantly cheaper, a little commitment to what the transaction is and what the output is, and then do the execution off chain. And so what that lets you do is you process these transactions off chain, and then someone locks up some money and is posting commitments saying like, oh, here's what's happening off chain. And if that person ever lies, like, let's say they commit to, hey, you know what, I actually have all the money in the system, then anyone in the world who's running this computation off chain can view that and can challenge it, and can challenge that invalid commitment. And when you challenge an invalid commitment, the person who posted up that bond and sent that invalid commitment can now execute the transaction on chain, and you can steal that bond, right? So basically, if I wanted to steal all of the money in the bridge contract for an optimistic rollup, I would post a bond and I would make a commitment that says, hey, I have this money now. And anyone in the world could then see that. As long as there's one person running a full node, an L2 full node, They can see that and they can challenge it, and then they can steal my bond and the money is safe now. So what you end up with is this sort of game theoretic model where nobody's going to be making these invalid commitments because they have to post money to do it. And it's very likely that they will just get challenged and they will lose that money. But you don't have to pay all of the costs to execute the transactions on chain. The other option is ZK rollups. And I guess for more context, you need a challenge period, like in between a commitment being posted and withdrawing money. And that challenge period is 1 week right now. So it's the downside of optimistic rollups is to bridge money out using the native bridge. It takes 1 week because you need to give time for people to find the invalid commitment and challenge it. The other approach is ZK rollups, where you sort of make these commitments to the chain, and rather than doing it optimistically and proving invalidity, you instead prove validity. So you go up front and you say, hey, I have all these transactions, here's what the result will be, and I prove that it's valid using a zero knowledge proof. And zero knowledge proofs are pretty crazy. It's like this very new moon math, and it's honestly still insane to me that this is possible. And the benefit of ZK rollups is you don't have to have this 1 week period, and you verify upfront that these transactions are valid, and you save a little bit on costs. So what do these? Okay, so we have the basic design for these layer 2s, but how do we make them successful, right? How do we make them competitive? And something that I've noticed recently is if you look under the hood of a lot of these popular L1s right now, they have forked Geth, which is the most popular Ethereum client. They have taken the Ethereum's EVM and placed it into their client. So if I send a transaction or I deploy a contract on Avalanche or Polygon or Binance Smart Chain or Phantom or L1 Ethereum, it will always be the same. It's the same contract that gets deployed. It executes the same when I transact with it. It's the same. And this is great because as a developer, I can just treat them all the same, right? And as a user, I can interact with all the same things. I can use the same tooling. Everything just works. So we're seeing EVM equivalence, being one-to-one, literally just using the code of the Ethereum client is where all of these chains are going. There's such a network effect around the EVM right now where there's so many developers who understand it. There's so much good tooling. There's audit firms for it. There's, analytics tools, block explorers. There's just so much that forking Geth gives you. So Etherscan will just work out of the box. Tenderly is a really popular developer tool for debugging transactions. Hardhat lets you simulate hard hat forking lets you simulate transactions on mainnet without actually sending them to a mainnet. And so being EVM equivalent, what all these L1s are doing makes you supportive, makes you by default supported by all these different tools. And so how do we get EVM equivalence on these layer 2s, right? For these layer 2s to be successful, they need to be EVM equivalent. So EVM equivalence is going live on mainnet for optimistic Ethereum in mid-November. Arbitrum is also an optimistic rollup that is making the shift to EVM equivalence soon as well. So we'll have two EVM equivalent rollups very soon. For EVM equivalence in ZK rollups, because there's a lot of research that needs to happen to build a ZK EVM, which will support EVM equivalence for ZK rollups. So that's still it's being built. There's a lot of smart minds working on it, but it's not ready right now. I'm excited for when it will be ready, but now we're sort of left in this world where, okay, we need EVM equivalence. We don't want to rely on these other L1s. We want to rely on L2s that inherit Ethereum's security guarantees. And EVM equivalence is coming soon. So we're in a really, really exciting time for rollups and layer 2s. So just to give you some stats on how rollups work, rollups are 10 to 100x cheaper because you're posting transactions onto layer 1. You still are the transaction fees scale with layer 1. So if L1 gets 3x more expensive, it'll actually get more expensive to transact on layer 2, but it's still 1 to 2 orders of magnitude cheaper, which is amazing, right? This is how we accomplish these values of being being open and permissionless and like really being inclusive now, right? Like it's so hard to use Ethereum now. Now you can come to layer 2s and inherit the same security guarantees of Ethereum for a fraction of the cost. And a common question that I get also is, when is it going live? Like, okay, this all sounds great, but like, when will it actually be ready? Rollups are live right now, like Optimistic Ethereum, Arbitrum, both doing a ton of fees and processing a ton of transactions already on mainnet. I think this chart is missing like Bitcoin and Binance Smart Chain, which are doing more fees than us, but it's pretty hype. Like this stuff's actually happening. Like for the longest time, rollups and layer 2s have been in this research phase where they've been prototyped, but not really usable. Like these things are usable now, and they're getting real traction. But we're still in this phase where it's super early, right? Like we are only at about 1% of our throughput limits. So there's a long way to go. And so this brings us back to where we started. Ethereum is so sick, and we don't want Ethereum to go to this place where there's all these forks of Ethereum that have their own security guarantees and don't share in this shared pool of security and are also limited by the security of their bridges. That's not a world that feels like it will outlive us or our kids, but we need to move more towards a world as described in this post from a year ago of having a rollup centric Ethereum roadmap. What we want is this Ethereum chain that is so secure, it's so reversion resistant, it's so secure from 51% attacks or censorship, and you, instead of having many different layer 1s, you have many different rollups that are building on top of it that inherit the same security guarantees but make things cheaper. And also, like, because these rollups will be EVM equivalent, like if we ever speed up Geth, right, like make some optimization to our software, we can then pull that in and make Ethereum layer 1 more like improve the performance of the Ethereum layer 1 clients. And if a bug gets patched by the Geth team, like we can then immediately bring in that patched bug as well. So not only are we like sharing in security, we're sharing in the technology stack, and we're also sharing in like, we're developing on the same stack. So like anything we do to contribute to the Ethereum ecosystem and the Ethereum infrastructure also benefits layer 1, right? So the way to think about layer 1 and layer 2 is just like, it's so synergistic, right? Like we're solving the same problem. We're working on sort of like, you can think of it as like one network, right? Like Optimism is developing the future of Ethereum. Like the core EF, like Ethereum Foundation developers are building the future of Ethereum. And we're all contributing to this sort of roll-up centric Ethereum that, we hope we can get to very, very soon. So let's do it. Let's scale Ethereum. And, just to do a final shill for Optimism PBC, we're focusing on scaling both Ethereum's tech and values. And if any of you guys are interested, please check out our jobs page. We have a lot of different postings at jobs.optimism.io. If you're interested in like contributing to like the low level core Ethereum protocol, this is the place to be. I've learned so much about the deep inner workings of Ethereum that I would not have been able to learn at any other place. If you want to, like, if you enjoy talking with people and, you're more of a social type, a coordination, someone who likes to coordinate and manage projects, then you can also work really closely with top Ethereum projects. Like we're sort of coordinating this big shift of all the top projects on Ethereum onto our network. So you get to talk with the CEO and CTOs of, all of the top projects in Ethereum. If you're interested in solving hard computer science problems, we have a lot of those. And if you're interested in herding cats, it's not easy having a distributed team with people all around the world. And so if your skill set is getting people to row in the same direction, we could totally, use that skill set. And if we succeed at building what we're trying to build, then we can reinvent capitalism and incentivize the type of future that you want to see. So cool. Looks like I have around 5 minutes. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Sure. I mean, we have some questions in the chat, but first off, like,
Yeah.
is Optimism looking for either interns or kind of like less experienced new grad engineers? Because this is, I mean, it's kind of like a global problem. Most job postings, I mean, I don't know, I haven't really looked at your website, like the job posting on your website, but most of it's just for like senior people. So I was like,
Yeah,
whether
for
you're in
sure.
college or not.
Yeah. There are no intern roles right now, but if you are a new grad, I would definitely recommend checking out, especially if you have a technical background, I'd recommend checking out the integrations engineer job description. Basically, as an integrations engineer, you're working with the CEO and CTO of these top Ethereum projects to help them develop onto our platform. And I definitely would recommend that. It does require like a bit of Ethereum knowledge, but you can come in as a noob and you'll learn a lot because you'll be able to like dive into the code bases of top projects that are like in production. So yeah, that's definitely one role to keep an eye out for. And also just like hop in our Discord and yeah, just like if you're interested in other ways of contributing on the side, hop in our Discord and there's a channel called Contributing. I definitely would recommend like saying like, hey, I want to contribute. Here's my skill set. What can I do? And I think there's a lot of little projects that we'd love help on.
Good.
Cool. So I'm going to answer some of these questions in the chat. So to be clear, become EVM equivalent means adjusting the clients so they look even more similar to the Geth clients. Being EVM equivalent, at least right now, means literally copying the Geth client, right? Like there's a lot of different clients that are trying to like mimic EVM equivalence. And like, that's honestly what we were trying to do originally was like, hey, we did build on top of Geth, but we're like, let's try to make this thing like, support Solidity contracts and whatnot. But like being EVM equivalent means like, if you literally just take Geth, then you will be one-to-one with Geth, right? And so that's what a lot of these layer ones are doing is they literally just copied a lot of the code from Geth and then they ported it into their client and then like built a different consensus mechanism and built stuff around it, like a different bridge and whatnot. So like to be truly EVM equivalent is like to literally use the same software.
Okay, cool, thanks. Sorry, I hope you don't mind that I just unmuted
Yeah.
myself. And you said that both Optimism and Arbitrum are moving towards EVM equivalence.
Yeah, so we're rolling this out right now. We're going to do the upgrade on mainnet in November. I know Arbitrum is planning this thing called Arbitrum Nitro, where they are going to switch to Geth. I'm not sure. I don't think they've put an exact date on it, so I don't know when it's coming, but I know that they're also making that shift.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So, and like just out of curiosity, so like, what's the current kind of status quo then for actually like if you want to develop on a rollup, like on Optimism, for example, but it's not EVM, it's not like technically EVM compatible. Like how does that work?
Yeah, so the way that it's worked for the past few months is we are EVM compatible, but we're not EVM equivalent. So you could deploy Solidity smart contracts onto our chain, but like gas usage is not the same. Like under the hood, if you're actually like going to inspect the transaction, there's a lot of other interesting like weird stuff that's happening in between calling different opcodes, and that's like caused a whole bunch of little things to break. Whereas now we're making the shift to like, all right, like the diff between our code base and Geth is like going to be under 1,000 lines. Yeah.
Why not just like go through for that initially?
Yeah, I wish we had. The big reason was there was concern about being able to create this, like the challenge. So being able to challenge an EVM transaction on layer one is not actually super trivial. The approach that we had before like allowed us to have this contract in layer two and layer one that just interacted the same. So you could challenge it. Like the transaction would run through the same contract on layer two as it would run through when you challenged it on layer one. So it was like the fastest way to get a working fraud proof. But what we've learned now is like, we should not be optimizing for the fraud proof being maximally simple. Like we should be optimizing for the experience of using the chain to be maximally simple. And the fraud proof just needs to be correct, right? It doesn't need to be like super easy to challenge. And so, yeah, we basically moved some of the complexity from layer two into the fraud proof or like the challenge.
Thanks.
Cool. Where are transaction costs coming into play in these rollups? Users still pay a fee, albeit reduced. I'm not sure I understand this question.
Sorry, just because like if you're using a rollup, you still have to pay like some type of, I don't know, I just technically call it like a gas cost. You're still paying some type of fee to basically use it. So I was kind of asking like, so like how does that fit kind of within the like rollup model?
Yeah, so you pay fees very similar to how you would pay fees on layer one. Right now, people are paying fees in ETH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Sorry.
No worries. In your opinion, what would it be better for most crypto activity to happen on Ethereum if when these scaling issues are adequately resolved, or do you think there's a legitimate reasons for other L1s to exist? I mean, there's definitely a legitimate reason for other L1s to exist. Like a lot of these different L1s, especially projects like, I think Solana is pretty interesting. It's like taking a very different approach. Like they've built a whole new client, and they have a different, smart contracting language. And I think it's great to have these other L1s like trying different things or filling new niches. Like you also have like, certain chains that are focused entirely on gaming, right? And so like if you're building a chain that's focused on gaming, like maybe you can compromise a little bit on needing to like, survive a World War III, but like maybe you need cheaper transactions, right? So I think it's a good thing for like, having more innovation. I think when we're talking about like scaling Ethereum and like scaling the types of things that would happen on Ethereum if Ethereum was cheaper, I think that would ideally happen on layer twos that also inherit Ethereum security and tech stack, rather than on these other layer ones, which are like mimicking Ethereum, but are not, in terms of security or, are also constrained by like the security models of their bridges. Cool. I see one more that is, what is the TPS now and future target TPS? Great. So we are artificially like, we have like put a cap on our transaction throughput as we're like testing the system out. I think our cap is currently at 200K transactions per day. We feel pretty confident that we can get to 5x the transactions of Ethereum on a single optimistic Ethereum chain. But obviously there's the opportunity to have many different optimistic Ethereum chains that are all, inheriting Ethereum security. So, we get to a place where if the entire Ethereum chain is, filled up with rollup like commitments, that, we're talking like Ethereum scaling 100x now. And, once ETH2 is live and there's more scalable data availability, the number that's been estimated is like around 100,000 transactions per day, or 100,000 transactions per second across all rollups. Oh, great. And this kind of, I think that maybe kind of answered the next question, which is like, how are rollups affected by ETH2? Like once the merge happens and you have like these shards that are coming to consensus on lots of data, then rollups can now post their data. Instead of posting it to layer one, Ethereum, they can post it to ETH2. And so what that lets you do is those like costs that I showed of like, $2 per transaction will go way down. And we'll have way more capacity to post more data on chain. So basically what happens is once the merge happens, fees on all rollups go down significantly. Cool. Yeah, any other questions? I know I think we're slightly over time, I guess, but I'm happy
we have hard stop at 4. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to continue answering questions up until then, though. Let's see.
Actually, I have a question. So if you were to develop directly on like a layer 2, how does it actually differ than just building a base layer Ethereum?
Yeah, so I mean, after we are EVM equivalent, it shouldn't really matter. Like okay. It's like you literally would just change the endpoint that you're deploying to, and you could deploy the exact same contracts. You could use, obviously instead of going to etherscan.io, you now go to optimistic.etherscan.io. but like all the tooling, pretty much all the tooling will work out of the gate. And you can basically treat it as if it's like deploying to a test net, right? It's like just another Ethereum chain. The only like caveat there is fees are slightly different because you have to pay for like the cost to do this transaction on layer 2 and the cost to like post the transaction to layer 1. So fees have these two parts of like the layer 1 cost and the layer 2 cost, which is like a small nuance, but it doesn't really affect most tools, or most developers don't really need to care about that. Yeah. But if you're building like cross-chain stuff, then there's like a whole new design space there, right? Like something that's been an interesting trend is like Uniswap, for example, is upgradable on layer 2 by L1 governance. So what happens is like L1 governance could pass a vote, and then they would send a transaction into L2 that would then like upgrade the L2 Uniswap contracts. So that design space of like bridges and messages between layer 1 and layer 2 is a whole new like developer experience and a whole new paradigm. But for most applications, you don't really need to use that, and you can just treat it like its own chain.
Makes sense. Yeah, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to either unmute, raise your hand, or post in the chat. Actually, yeah, I have another question.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. What's kind of equilibrium that you're expecting in terms of like how many kind of different roll-up platforms there'll be? So obviously the main two, like Arbitrum and Optimism, but do you see more, at least in like optimistic roll-up space, coming out and actually getting significant usage, or do you think it's kind of going to settle in this, like these two?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like within the next year, both like Arbitrum and optimistic Ethereum will be fully congested. Like they will be filled up. But I don't necessarily see like, yeah, there's definitely a downside, right, to having like tons of different rollups that all have like different like stacks and different, different models and different nuances. Like I definitely see that there would be a benefit to like deploying the same stack multiple times. So like, yeah, we're still figuring out the strategy here, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's like multiple optimistic rollups that are all using the same stack that are deployed at the same time, right? So you could imagine just like many different rollups. Yeah, many different rollups that are all using, say, Optimism's stack, all inheriting from the same security of layer 1.
Thanks.
If fees go down substantially with ETH2, do we still need layer 2s? Great, that's a great question. So as part of ETH2, there was sort of this idea of like, you would have ETH2 phase 0, which is just like proof of stake, ETH2 phase 1, which is just these shards coming to consensus on data. And then you have ETH2 phase 2, which is like the execution, like this is the execution environments, which is like, now you can deploy contracts and actually like do Ethereum things on it. What's since happened is ETH2 phase 2 sort of got scrapped, and now rollups exist as the execution environments for ETH2. So ETH2 is really just a bunch of shards coming to consensus on data, and then like contracts get deployed on rollups, transactions get sent on rollups, right? So ETH2 is sort of like a data layer for rollups. So it's not like you can use ETH2 or you use like rollups, like you will use them both together. And I have no idea when ETH2 is going live. I wish I did though. That would help us. That would help us do some better technical roadmap planning. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And yeah, feel free to My DMs are open on Twitter. So I'm at like at @KevinJHo_. So feel free to like DM me on Twitter if you guys have any questions. I'd love to help out. If you're looking for roles, maybe I can connect you with someone in the Ethereum space who's interested in hiring. And yeah, Ethereum is awesome. And I hope that, some of you guys also feel the same way and join the community and the movement.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
See you.
See ya.